The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro arrived in Saudi Arabia on an official visit to strengthen bilateral ties between the two countries. In Ecuador, heavy rain and flooding have affected some 1,600 families in the province of Esmeraldas, and the actions to provide material assistance to the victims are ongoing. And the passenger trains resumed operations in Odisha's Balasore district in India after the triple train collision that left more than 200 people dead and over 1,000 injured. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Sunday, the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro arrived in Saudi Arabia on an official visit to strengthen bilateral ties between the two countries. On his Twitter account, the Bolivarian president expressed that he continues with his international agenda, now from Saudi Arabia. In another tweet, Maduro emphasized that his visit seeks to stabilize and recover all, and that with perseverance, they will achieve fair and necessary agreements. This is the Venezuelan president's third visit to the country, and he is scheduled to meet with the prime Saudi minister. The two nations are aiming for mutually beneficial cooperation in areas such as petrochemicals, energy, agriculture, information, and communication. Also, let us remember that relations between Venezuela and Saudi Arabia trace back to the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEP, which both nations joined on September 14, 1960. In this sense, the first steps towards closer relations came in the late 70s. However, it was not until President Hugo Chávez Frías came to power that bilateral ties broadened, paving the way for a new stage of cooperation, brotherhood, and solidarity beyond all, always based on diversity and mutual respect. Let's move on to other topics. Mexico's most populous state turned its back on decades of single-party rule, deciding to move forward with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's ruling Morena party over the Institutional Revolutionary Party. According to the National Electoral Institute, candidate Delfina Gómez of the Morena party won between 52.1% and 54.2% of the ballots in the state of Mexico, compared with 43% to 45.2% for Alejandra del Moral, representing the opposition coalition. In this sense, the Electoral Commission reported the turnout for these elections was between 48.7% and 50.2% of the eligible state voters. Shortly after the preliminary forecast was announced, del Moral conceded and congratulated Morena's candidate for her victory.
It has been 100 long years of corruption and neglect. The times change, and the people have organized and won. I'm full of joy and emotion because a new history of love and respect is going to be written in our state of Mexico. A new history of vocation and support for those who have less. A government that understands that for the good of all, the poor must come first. A new way of governing, a government of the people and for the people, and a different kind of public servant.
On the other hand, the alliance led by the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI, with the gubernatorial candidate Manolo Jiménez, won in the state of Coahuila. The state, or the candidate for this state of the coalition formed by the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the National Action Party, and the Party of the Democratic Revolution, obtained more than 55% of the votes and defeated Armando Guadiana, the representative of Morena. In general terms, the election day in both states went without incidents, although with delays in the installation and the opening of some polling stations, long lines, and other minor incidents. Sunday's elections were the last hurdle that the political parties had to overcome in Mexico before defining their candidates for the presidential succession in 2024. On Sunday, the Guarani Mimbiara indigenous people held a new protest against a legal maneuver that may allow the agribusiness lobby to reduce indigenous territorial claims to those existing up to 1988. Hundreds of people gathered in the north of Sao Paulo to demonstrate against the Bill 490. The law was passed in the Chamber of Deputies last Tuesday despite opposition from the ruling party. Then it will be discussed and voted in the Senate. Meanwhile, there is expectation over the federal Supreme Court ruling on the legality of the said bill scheduled for next Wednesday. June the 7th, the proposed piece of legislation establishes that indigenous people will only be able to claim lands already occupied by them until October the 5th, 1988, a date by which most claims had not been formalized yet. A new violence incident shook Ecuador on Sunday, with 5 people were gunned down in the city of Guayaquil. Authorities said 3 men on a motorcycle arrived to the Isla Trinitaria sector and opened fire inside a house, killing at least 5 people and injuring another 8. Police Colonel Fabari Montalvo said one of the deceased was a police officer who was shot several times in the head. According to local media, the bodies of a man and a woman were found outside the house where a party was being held. Guayaquil, Ecuador's second largest city with some 2.8 million inhabitants, is one of the hardest hit cities regarding the crime and drug trafficking in Ecuador.
We have the account of 2 eyewitnesses who said that there were 3 men who arrived on motorcycle, got inside the house and fired several shots, resulting so far in 5 people dead and another 8 wounded who have been taken to several city hospitals.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Ecuador, heavy rain and flooding have affected some 1,600 families in the province of Esmeraldas, and the actions to provide material assistance to the victims are ongoing. On Sunday, after 12 hours of non-stop rain, 6 rivers overflowed and entire neighborhoods were flooded. The military rescued 530 people with boats and helicopters. Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso tweeted that public institutions are working to save lives. The Ministry of Education called off in-person classes in 3 municipalities, and the Secretariat of the Risk Management said the armed forces, the national police, and the entire national risk system are coordinating the evaluation and the evacuation of the affected population. During the current winter's rainy season in Ecuador, over 30 people have died, and there have been road damages, mudslides, and thousands of crop hectares ruined. At least 15 people died and another 8 are missing after heavy rains unleashed widespread flooding and several landslides across Haiti over the weekend. According to the country's Civil Protection Agency, over 13,000 people were forced to evacuate as water consumed hundreds of homes, turning some streets into raging rivers. Meanwhile, more than 7,000 families reported damage, with officials still assessing the impact of the rains that deluged the Caribbean nation on Saturday. The downpour also caused significant damage to crops in the country's central region at a time when starvation is deepening. In this sense, the Prime Minister Ariel Henry said his administration is working with local and international organizations to respond to the needs of those affected by the floods. United Kingdom's Premier Rishi Sunak confirmed on Monday that his administration acquired 2 more barges to house asylum seekers as part of his alleged efforts to reduce channel crossings. Speaking from the Kent, the UK Premier also said that in order to reduce pressures on local communities, asylum seekers would also be allocated on ships. The measure was met with furious reaction from local charities, members of parliament and social organizations who condemned the expansion of the plan and urged the government to concentrate on reducing the asylum seeker backlog rather than imprison them. According to the Home Office figures, more than 45,000 people crossed the channel in 2022, the highest number since figures began to be collected in 2018. Meanwhile, in 2023, over 7,000 people had been detected making the dangerous journey.
I know these are tough measures, and I make no apology for that. We cannot allow our generosity of spirit to be used as a weapon against us or against those who are being pushed to risk their lives in the channel by criminal gangs. Our approach is working. For the first time, crossings are down by 20%.
Now we move on to other topics. The Russian government confirmed on Monday its forces thwart a major Ukrainian offensive in the Donetsk region, destroying tanks and armored vehicles. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Kiev launched a large-scale offensive in 5 sectors in South Donetsk using 6 mechanized and 2 tank battalions. The ministry also said that more than 200 Ukrainian troops had been killed, and 16 tanks, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, and 21 armored personnel carriers destroyed. In this sense, the Russian government named the Ukrainian units involved in the attacks as the 23rd and 31st Mechanized Brigades. Meanwhile, Kiev recently set up artillery and drone attacks on Russian cities, including the assault of a sabotage group in the province of Belgorod on Sunday. And the government of China condemned military alliances similar to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Asia and the Pacific at a security forum in Singapore. China's defense minister Li Shanfu said that the Cold War mentality was resurfacing in the region and warned that military alliances such as NATO could lead the region into new conflicts. On the sidelines of the annual Asia-Pacific Intergovernmental Security Conference, the defense minister called on the region's leaders to promote their common interests and resist Germany and Berlin. In that sense, Li pointed out that some states intervene in the internal affairs of other countries, applying unilateral sanctions, threatening with arms and color revolutions. Likewise, the Minister of Defense called for a solution to international affairs through dialogue. And TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Passenger trains resumed operations on Monday in Odisha's Balasore district in India after the triple train collision that left more than 200 people dead and over 1,000 injured. In this sense, Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishya also said that both the lines were tested before services resumed. Likewise, Vaishya revealed that the accident occurred due to a change in electronic interlocking. The triple train accident involved the Bengaluru-Howrah Superfast Express, the Coromandel Express, and a goods train, a freight train, on 3 separate tracks at Bahanaga Bazaar station in the Balasore district. Meanwhile, government authorities launched an investigation into the tragedy led by the Commissioner of Railway Safety and stated that any finding will be shared with the Central Bureau of Investigation to facilitate a quicker investigation. And we stay in India. There, a state government on Monday ordered a probe into the collapse of a portion of an under-construction bridge over the Ganges River over the weekend, the second time the structure has crashed in a year. No casualties were reported, with no movement of people or vehicles on the bridge, when nearly 250 meters of the concrete surface connecting pillars crashed into the river on Sunday. The four-lane Sultanganj-Awani Ghat bridge collapsed roughly 14 months after parts of it had failed due to a loose cable. The construction of the 3.6-kilometer-long bridge started in 2014, but it suffered delays and was scheduled to be inaugurated later this year, connecting the town of Bangalpur with Kegaria, about 250 kilometers east of Patna, the state capital. And on Monday, the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin arrived in India for talks with his counterpart Rajnath Singh. Austin was greeted with an honor guard ceremony before heading to meet with Singh, who is India's Minister of Defense. Austin was in Singapore on Sunday and will meet with Singh regarding information sharing, maritime security, and strengthening shared security in long term. According to the Indian military body, the presence of the U.S. Defense Secretary on this second visit to the Asian country comes 2 weeks before Prime Minister Narendra Modi's planned trip to Washington. India is considering the manufacture of jet engines as part of the technology transfer to boost its fighter jets. And the Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussain signed on Monday a memorandum of understanding with his Pakistani counterpart in Baghdad to facilitate security, defense, and tourism cooperation between the two countries.
We discuss cooperation in military and security areas. Pakistan is a strong country and has a strong military industry, and there is a joint work between the Iraqi Ministry of Defense and the defense and security authorities in Pakistan.
I'm very happy to know that both countries have agreed to open a Pakistani consulate in Najaf. We have discussed the MOU on Zairene hospitality, and inshallah, that process will be reaching a conclusion soon. I also want to announce the establishment of a Pakistani pilgrim center in Karbala, inshallah, which will be operationalized soon and benefit the Zairene.
In northern Afghanistan, nearly 80 girls were poisoned and hospitalized in 2 separate attacks on their primary schools, a local education official said on Sunday. It is believed to be the first such attack since the Taliban came to power in August 2021 and began its offensive against the rights and freedoms of Afghan women and girls. Girls are barred from education beyond the 6th grade, including university, and women are barred from most jobs and public spaces. The attacks took place in the Saripul province on Saturday and Sunday. According to Muhammad Rahmani, the director of the Provincial Education Department, 60 students were poisoned at Nashwat-e-Kabad Ab School and another 17 at Nashwat-e-Faizabad School. The department's investigation is ongoing, and initial inquiries show that someone paid a third party to carry out the attacks, Rahmani said. And a 3-year-old boy in Palestine died in a hospital 4 days after he was shot in the head by the Israeli soldiers while riding in a car with his father in the occupied West Bank. Mohammed Al-Tamimi was airlifted to the Sheba hospital near Tel Aviv after the incident on Thursday night and remained in a critical condition until medical officials announced his death on Monday. His father, Haitham Al-Tamimi, is still being treated at a Palestinian hospital with no life-threatening injuries. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry strongly condemned the killing of Tamimi as a heinous crime against humanity and demanded an urgent international investigation into this crime and other crimes of killing Palestinian children. In Senegal, tensions remain high after 6 people died during violent protests that erupted since last Friday in several cities, raising the death toll to 15. Senegal, long considered one of West Africa's most stable democracies, has experienced a string of anti-government protests following a court conviction against opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. Foreign allies are urging a return to calm. The government has acknowledged that it has restricted access to social networks such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter, allegedly in order to stop the dissemination of hateful and subversive messages. Sonko, a 48-year-old former tax inspector, was initially charged with rape but was convicted on a lesser charge of morally corrupting a young woman and has been sentenced to 2 years in prison. He claims the charges against him are a bid by the government to torpedo his political career ahead of the presidential elections next year. And the clashes between Sudan's army and rapid support forces escalated over the weekend after the collapse of ceasefire talks. Fighting between Army General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy rapid support forces commander Mohamed Hamdallah has gripped Khartoum and the western region of Darfur for over 7 weeks now, despite numerous attempts to broker a humanitarian truce. On May 22nd, both sides entered a ceasefire that lasted until last Saturday. The ceasefire, mediated by Saudi Arabia and the United States, provided some humanitarian aid, but it was constantly violated, as has previously fragile ceasefire. According to United Nations reports, since the conflict began on April 15th, more than 1,000 people have been killed, over 1 million have been displaced within Sudan, and more than 400,000 people have fled to neighboring countries. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.